And just a quick word before we get started. This episode was recorded before Netflix and Neil Gaiman dropped the surprise episode 11 for the new Sandman series. So this episode of the podcast will only cover episodes 1 through 10 of the series, as at the time we did not know that episode 11 existed. So here we go. Hello and welcome to Fresh Face Comics, the comic book podcast where a lifelong comic book reader guides his friend through the world of comics for the first time. My name is Joey Morgan, the aforementioned lifelong reader. With me, as always, is Jacob Licklider, the aforementioned newbie.
Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream.
But today, Jacob is like the furthest thing from a newbie
Yeah.
as we can possibly get on here today. In fact, he's the most experienced of our panel of guests here to talk about 2022's Netflix's The Sandman. Hopefully, season 1. Please don't cancel it, Netflix. Today, we and Jacob have two guests with us today to talk about the Sandman series that just came out on Netflix, the live action adaptation that has been fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I know Jacob really enjoyed it. Today, to talk with us about it, we have varying degrees of Sandman experience, I guess. So starting off with Sandman Jr., we have Mason,
Dream a little dream of me.
who has absolutely no Sandman experience prior to the Netflix show. Right? You haven't experienced any version of the Sandman, any stories from it. You're not familiar with the story at all, right?
Yeah, literally, I knew nothing. All I knew was that there was a character named Dream, and that was actually no. I did know one other thing about the story from osmosis of hearing about it, but I'll bring that up later.
Okay, but yeah, so Mason hasn't heard any. This is mostly his first experience with the story. You can follow Mason on Twitter at the GD256. I'll leave that link in the description. Also, we have novice Sandman. We have Marcus Cotton, our good friend here. Hello, how are you, Marcus?
I had a dream.
Are we just singing for our intros?
Yes.
I love
Yeah.
this. So Marcus here. Marcus here has only heard the Audible version of Sandman, which has adapted the first 40 odd issues of the Sandman comic. And actually, as of today of recording, you just got the first 2 volumes of the new editions of the comic in today, right?
Yeah, a couple days ago, I just bought the deluxe editions. I was waiting for the omnibuses, but volume 1 temporarily went out of print, so it was like, okay, screw that, I'm just getting these.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And I guess I would be next on the chain. I've read just the whole main 75 issue series, whatever's included in the first 2 omnibus volumes. I've heard the whole Audible adaptation. I've watched the series now on Netflix. And Jacob, I guess, is Sandman Supreme.
I suppose, because I've read everything.
You've read everything. You have all 3 volumes
Except
of the
apparently
omnibus.
the Lock and Key crossover, which is a thing, but I've never read
Yeah.
Lock and Key.
More on that later, I guess. But yeah, so Jake has read the whole main series, any miscellaneous material and extra mini series and spin-offs in the 3rd omnibus there. He's listened to the Audible adaptation, and now we've all watched the Sandman Netflix series, and we're all very excited to be talking about it, I'm sure. So let's dive right in. So typically how we do things on the podcast here is we do a non-spoiler section first and then dive into spoilers. We're gonna sort of slowly work our way into that. So for now, until I say so, just keep the conversation fairly non-spoiler. Try to steer clear of anything that people who haven't seen the series yet might not want to hear. I guess that's about it. Let's get into this. Oh, also, I forgot to mention. I mentioned Mason's Twitter. You can follow the rest of us on Twitter. Marcus is at Sir Jedi Sentinel. I am at Jomo with 3 underscores. Jacob is at Newt5996. All of us will be linked down in the description. You can go follow us there. I like to think we're enjoyable to follow. But yeah, let's get into this with our non-spoiler section. I'm going to start off the conversation by passing it over to Mason as the freshest face here on this episode. Mason, what is the Sandman about?
So the Sandman is okay. Well, this is interesting because what do you mean by non-spoilery? Because I didn't know anything going into it.
I
So
would
the
say
plot surprised me.
okay.
So what's the premise basically of this first season?
Yeah, okay. So
All right,
who are the characters? Who are our key players here, I guess?
All right, so some key players. We have Dream. Dream is our main character. He is the Sandman. He is the physical embodiment of the idea of dreaming. He is in charge of when people go to sleep, he is the person that gives them dreams. Some other characters that we see, again, I'm trying to figure out who is a spoiler and who isn't. I'm sorry. Can someone help me out here?
Oh no, you're good. You could talk about. Oh man,
What's
who?
the inciting
I mean-
incident? Because most
Oh,
people,
yeah,
Okay, yeah, I can do that.
when you pitch the Sandman, I like to pitch with what that inciting incident is.
Okay, so what I'm about to explain is basically the first episode of the show and the inciting incident of the Sandman. Basically, what happens is in like late 1800s, early 1900s, there's a family who had a loss, and due to the loss, they try to perform a ritual to bring death to them to try to give the person that they lost back. But what they accidentally do is they summon Dream, who is our main character, and as a result of this, Dream is basically kept in confinement, trying to like be used to bring this guy back for like over a century. And the show, and I presume the comics, spin off as a result of Dream wasn't there for over 100 years.
and that is like the pitch of this of the series. I guess in regards to the comic, pretty much just the timeline has shifted a little bit. He's captured the same year, but because the comic started releasing it in what 88, I think
88,
89.
89.
It's a shorter time span, so it's not even like a century that he's been captured. But yeah, so that is the core premise of the Sandman. What did you make of Dream's character as someone who wasn't familiar with it at all?
It was interesting. I'll be honest. At first, I wasn't necessarily on board. Um, again, I'll keep away from spoilers, but I felt like I was a bit distant from what his character was towards the start. But as it went on, I was very much on board with this depiction. Like his depiction made sense with who his character was and what he had to do over the course of his eternal life. And I don't know the actor's name, but I thought he did a fantastic job portraying this character.
Oh, Tom Sturridge. Oh yeah, he's brilliant. Yeah, fantastic casting on Netflix's end. Like just yeah, a
Absolutely.
fantastic version of Dream. Let's delve into some of the other characters though. Some of the other characters that are like a big part of the marketing for the show. A big thing that they keep saying is Death has family. So Death is obviously one of them. Dream is one of those siblings. They have other siblings that we meet along the way. We meet Death obviously. We meet Desire. We meet Despair very briefly. Any word on those characters? What stuck out to you, Mason?
Me, I really enjoyed. I don't know, like okay, like specifically with Death. I think like that was. I had never seen a depiction of Death quite like that before.
Hmm.
In which, like, because usually the like Death is like this wordless creature that just goes by and kills, but like no, like the character of Death, she treats it as like a connecting with people. Like it's something I have to do, and like I'm gonna be nice about it. Like whenever a character dies, she's not like, well, it's over, come on. Like she's like, it's okay, here, like come walk with me. There's something I have to show you. Like she's very nice about it, and I that was new for me because like the depictions of Death I've seen, like I mean, the first thing I think of is like I like for lack I guess Ghost of Christmas Future kind of Death portrayals.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
Yeah,
that was
there's a quote. There's a quote that was either in the series or I think it's something Neil Gaiman himself said. That it's like the last face you're ever gonna see should be a friendly one.
And I love that. I love that philosophy when approaching a character like Death, because when she comes into it, again, without getting too spoilery, like we see some examples of like what she does for a living. She goes around, she takes some people in their final moment, she takes them away, and she treats them very kindly. She doesn't want, she's not there to rip them away from their lives, she's not there to be mean about it. It's comfort. It's there to say, okay, now you're done with this, time to move on to the next. And and big props to Kirby Howell Baptiste, who plays Death in this series. She's not around for too much of it, but she does a fantastic job with what she's given, and one of the big stand-up performances of the show, I think.
Honestly, I should say all the Endless are just hard characters to portray.
Oh yeah.
Like just to study them, and you're really the casting in this show in general is just perfect. Like,
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I'd like to toss it over to Marcus here for a little bit to talk about some of the supporting cast of the show. Let's talk about briefly some of the other one of the other big siblings that plays a big role in the show, Desire, as played by Mason Alexander Park in this series. Marcus, as someone that's only heard the Audible version, and I cannot think of the actor's name off the top of my head, whoever played Desire in the Audible version. How did how did Mason Alexander Park compare? What do you make of Desire as a character? How did it translate to the show? Take it away.
Um, oh God, it's been a while since I've even heard the Audible adaptation. I meant to re-listen to it before the series came out, but then it was like, oh, it's already the beginning of August. I'm not going to have the time. But yeah, no, it's like now Mason Alexander Park is the face I imagine when I think of Desire of the Endless.
Oh, same here, totally.
And what's a good way to phrase it? They are, well, they are the embodiment of all desire. You know, like basically in the comics, and they are depicted as being androgynous, and I always interpreted that as they are a physical combination of everything everyone has ever desired. And shoot, I'm trying to figure out how to explain their personality. Like, just their maliciousness, and more importantly, the reason for their maliciousness, and trying to tie it in. And well, I'm trying to tie it into the theme of desire itself is where I'm getting hung up here.
Yeah, no, yeah, I gotcha. I do see what you're going for, definitely. And much like Death, like, it's a character that does not play a huge role in the series, but one that definitely makes an impact. And I've absolutely fallen in love with Mason Alexander Park's performance as a whole. I think I can't even think what's going to be out first. This will probably be out first, but we talk about Mason Alexander Park as like sort of like a fan cast idea in a future episode of Fresh Face Comics, or sorry, not Fresh Face Comics, a video coming up on the channel soon. I think I'm totally enamored by them as an actress, actress, whatever. Yeah, just fantastic performance. I love what they did with the character.
I saw a behind the scenes thing that Mason Alexander Park was only on set filming for 2 days, and
oh wow,
they
really?
managed to steal the entire show
That's
in their
crazy.
short screen time.
They also got the role because they asked Neil on Twitter.
I remember seeing that. Yeah, Neil Gaiman shared that, and he was like, here's just like, I think like, he was like promoting the fact that they were doing the Netflix show, and Mason Alexander Park just replied and like shot their shot, and I was like, just if you're still casting Desire, I'm available.
And I'm sure they actually had to audition, obviously.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
But my God, shoot your shot, because perfect.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like I will say, as someone who never experienced the character, like they showed up on screen, they didn't even say anything, and I was like, oh, perfect, I know exactly what this character is. And
yeah, so
their performance was amazing.
Like their first scene, their first like very brief appearance, they don't even say anything, and I think you get exactly who that character is. Yeah, it's brilliant. But on some more supporting roles, let's talk about some other ones that are a big part of like the promotion for the show. If we're trying to stay away from spoilers, let's talk about one lady, Joanna Constantine, as played by Jenna Coleman. So we're all big Doctor Who fans here on the call. We all know Jenna Coleman very much so as Clara Oswald from Doctor Who, and me at least here. I don't know if anyone else is like a huge Constantine fan from the comics at least, or just any version of Constantine, I guess. But whoever wants to take this away, I'll leave it open to whoever. Take the floor on her character. What do we make of Joanna Constantine?
So
I'll just say real quick. I'm sorry. I'll just say real quick. This was the one thing I knew about the show going in, that Constantine was a character.
Oh, okay,
In
gotcha.
the show, they were played by Jenna Coleman.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to take away. It's the one casting that I think is interesting because it basically was done because of rights issues.
Yeah. Well,
like-
I think it started as rights issues.
Yeah.
And then before, as they started to try to negotiate regular John Constantine into the series, they were just like, may as well, like it works. We'll keep it.
Yeah.
Like, and I would say I'm a huge John Constantine fan, but I mean I love this version of the character. I really do.
This was actually the one cast that I initially was a little wary of while watching, only because they stick in that episode very close to that issue in a lot of ways, and a lot of the dialogue choices. So your brain is kind of clicking. It should be this other character who is, established in the larger part of the DC universe, is a whole big character, and is a character who has been portrayed on screen before definitively by one person. Um, but Coleman is she really gets to shine here.
Oh yeah, definitely.
In all of her appearances, she gets to show a lot of her range as an actress, especially because she's working with material that is leagues ahead, in my opinion, of a lot of the material she got on Doctor Who.
Oh yeah, agreed.
Like,
Yeah.
ooh, there's so much pathos. My one complaint is I think some of her her costuming in that first episode could have been made a little more distinct than what it was. It was just a bit too
Yeah,
similar to
yeah.
the character she was based on. And it just sort of helped visually distance her from John just a little bit.
See, I think I don't know. I think it's weird. I think for me, I would almost prefer it to look more like John. I would want like the trench coat to be like longer and like rather open, with the red tie and everything. I would prefer that personally. But I do see where you're coming from. Yeah, if you do want to like distinguish the character, then I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, I also just think it's really interesting on just in general. A lot of the characters from the comics are altered in some way, but never in a way really that doesn't make them unrecognizable. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. There's a character we can't really talk too much about who's a big part here. One of
well,
the
there's also even
one of the
a
more
couple
villainous
of
roles, but because they're not part of the promotion, I don't want to bring them up
yeah.
really.
Well, there's also a minor character in the last couple episodes um, that was another example of just sort of a gender swap. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
and I think it almost worked better with that performance.
Yeah, yeah. I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
But yeah, that worked. But let's see. Oh yeah, let's also talk about a big one I want to talk about before we move into spoilers is Boyd Holbrook as the Corinthian. I especially want to ask
Mm.
Mason about this because this is a character that I don't even want to say they took liberties with, but they took liberties with the Corinthians' role in the early Sandman days, and I want to know what you made of them, like without knowing anything about their character going in.
That's interesting. Like, I mean, I enjoyed the Corinthians' role over the course of the series. I thought that their setup as to like becoming a driving force in the later episodes made sense. The visually the costuming I thought was very distinct. Like I'm sure the sunglasses was a thing in the comics, right?
Oh yeah, yep. Mhm.
And like, but okay, this is going to be a bit of a side tangent. Have any of you seen Daniel Green's video about like if Tolkien acted like his worst fans?
Yes, I
I
love
have
that video.
I have
Every
not
sing-
seen that.
every single time I looked at the Corinthian, I just thought of Daniel Green with his sunglasses on, and I just couldn't get that image out of my head.
Mason, now
I'll
that
have to
you've
look.
planted that image in my head, it's
I
gonna
will
be
have
stuck
to look that
there.
up now. That's great because Boyd
It's great.
Holbrook is like one of those characters that like personality wise and look wise they just ripped off the pages of the comics.
Oh yeah.
Like
Really? Okay.
yeah. Oh,
That's
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's kind of
Like I said, like
that's kind of
their role
interesting
is.
because
Sorry, you go.
no, it's like no, and it's kind of interesting because having not read the comics and only heard the Audible adaptation, so I probably have a very different image in my head of what these characters look like and represent. Like in the Audible version, the Corinthian is played brilliantly by Riz Ahmed,
Oh yeah, he's
and
brilliant.
he's kind of I was going to say coded, but with the Corinthian, the subtext is kind of just text. Um, but Riz Ahmed plays him very sort of effeminate, whereas Boyd Holbrook plays him very butch.
Mm. And
That's interesting.
I think both interpretations of it are very valid, and I think because I think what you're looking at there is mostly the voices they choose to use for the character.
Yeah.
So like I think like obviously when I say like they're ripped straight off the page, obviously nothing in the comic says like, oh yeah, what this character should sound like.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's that, but I think like honestly like personality wise they're identical, and I love the way Holbrook did it. I fucking love Boyd Holbrook as a whole because I remember I think have most of us here seen Logan?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
He's in Logan. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he's fucking brilliant in that.
Oh my gosh.
One of those just great villainous actors. And like I was like, without getting too spoilery, I'll say like he's one of the bigger villains of the series. Um, and so how they changed him from the comic, and like made him just a bigger part of the series than he actually is in the comic. I was like, if you're gonna choose like a big villain for the series, like that's what you do. He's the perfect actor to take it on. I think the way he played the character was fucking phenomenal. I would love to see more of him in the future. And I would say there's room for that. So yeah, I guess before we move into spoilers, I want to take it over to our Twitter questions that we got today for the episode. Um, so first question we got was from Jamie at Jamie_season 7. You can check him out on the last episode of Fresh Face Comics talking about Batman Hush. Jamie says, "What's your favorite casting in the show? Who's our favorite actor that they have cast in their role from the comic, or just favorite actor in the show if you haven't read the comic? Who would like to take the floor first?"
I can, because I know some Jacob certainly struggled with this, but like my reasoning on this is I allowed myself not to think about it. So like I didn't focus on it. And so I kind of let the thought drift into my mind. And the one that most kept popping back up into my head, and I'm gonna say it's safe not to say this is a spoiler because it was also part of the promotional material. Gwendolyn Christie is Lucifer.
Yes, fantastic choice. Yeah, I said this on Twitter, but like for a character that's had a fair few different adaptations in various mediums, being played by Gwendolyn Christie here, Michael Sheen on Audible, or obviously famously Tom Ellis in the TV series Lucifer. It's a role that can be taken a lot of different ways, and I really loved Gwendolyn Christie's spin on it. She's fantastic. Who would like to go next? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
On the Christie, I'm sure we'll have things to say when we actually talk about that episode in depth. But yeah, it's a difficult choice, a very very difficult choice, and my mind's been going back and forth on who to actually pick. But I think I'm going to pick someone whose role was kind of expanded quite a bit. But Vivian Archimpov, I think that's how you say her surname, as Lucian.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh,
Lucian.
yeah. Yep.
Like,
yeah,
it's a role that in the comics is not small, but it's ramped up here to
definitely
help adapt some scenes in very key ways to actually give Dream someone to talk to at points.
Mm-hmm. I remember when they first started showing like trailers and clips of Lucian for promoting this series, and I was like, it's definitely the character that obviously they've changed physically the most from the comic. You know, they both race and gender bent her. But I saw her in those clips and screenshots, and I was like, that's just Lucian. Like that I could see that immediately, and it's fantastic casting. I love her.
I think it was Marcus who said they made her like the mother figure almost.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's like when you see her and her relationship with the other characters in the Dreaming, the name of Dream's realm, obviously, she is just like such a mom to everyone.
Mason, do you have a favorite casting in the series?
Again, it's really difficult. Like, I don't think there was a single performance in the show that wasn't like defining in my head. I will say, I think the one that I'll pick one that no one else has said, but Stephen Fry.
Oh, okay. I was gonna call out Stephen Fry when I brought up mine.
But
yeah,
like,
he's brilliant.
Recently, I've been watching a lot of a bit of Fry and Laurie, and
awesome. Okay.
A lot of the characters he plays in that are very similar to the way that what's his name in the Sandman? Shoot,
Gilbert.
Yeah, they talk very similarly.
That's great.
And Stephen Fry is so good at like smart conversations that you can fall asleep to. It's so good.
I think I have my my favorite casting in the show. I was thinking about it while you guys were talking. Obviously, I can't really say much at all without going into spoilers, but I'll just say this: Ferdinand Kingsley as Hob Gadling.
Oh yeah.
I just that's all I need.
Mm.
Yeah, for me that's it. And I was like, for that character, for what he had to do in this series, it is perfect. And we'll talk a lot more about that in spoilers.
Yes.
So stick around
Yes.
for that.
Uh,
Uh, our next Twitter question comes from our good friend Coriander Parker at Elite Comic Nerd.
Oh God.
she,
we
she
have
said she says, as known homophobes, what is your opinion on gay people in the show? Obviously, this is a joke, as she indicates in her tweet. Uh, but I guess let's use this as a genuine conversation as to the things to be said about the show. Neil Gaiman is an author who's very open about the fact that he uses LGBTQIA plus characters in his work, specifically in the Sandman, and the TV show adaptation is obviously no exception. In any case, it's amped up here even more, I'd say.
I actually have something to say on that. I was expecting some of the changes to be different in how they portrayed LGBT characters, um, especially in like episode 5.
Yeah.
Like if you know the issue that
Huh.
episode 5 adapts, um, like
There's a lot more to be said there.
yeah, there's a lot of things to
In
be
what Neil
said.
Gaiman had originally wrote in the comic. So
Yet they
Oh, I'm intrigued.
they don't back away from it. They keep some of the elements that are problematic, though I think those are more tempered because they've taken some aspects from later issues and brought them forward and made them explicit.
yeah.
Specifically in the first episode, especially with a character.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But
which
yeah, so there's that. Thanks, Corey. Um, next Twitter question. We have two questions from one Jonathan Bermudez at Jonathan 787386110 says one, if there was anyone from the Audible adaptation you wish could reprise their roles in this series, who would it be? Obviously, this is not a question for Mason, but I think for the rest of us.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mason. You do have a question that I have specifically for you coming up. So
That's great.
yeah. So okay, for the rest of us, Jacob or Marcus, would one of you like to go?
That's
I
really
would
tough because I think for what the series is, it's so perfectly cast, similar to how the Audible version is so perfectly cast. But if I had to pick one, I would say James McAvoy is Dream, and not
I
because
I
I don't think Tom Sturridge didn't deliver. He did. He was fantastic, but it's just because
Mhm.
James McAvoy's voice can go like 1 or 2 octaves deeper.
That's fair. That's fair. And I think also for a lot of the Audible cast, like so many of those actors can play the characters physically, like not just for Audible, not just for audio. Like they can come on screen and play those characters in live action, like Kat Dennings' Death and Michael Sheen as Lucifer. Like there are things there that they can do in live action still, and I think for that reason there's a lot that we could carry over. But Jake, if you were to choose one, who would you bring over?
I have to bring over someone. This would be a season 2 pick for me at least, because just everyone's too perfect. I'd like to see Jeffrey Wright
As
reprise
Destiny.
his role as
Ooh.
Destiny.
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
he could physically
I
do
could
it.
see that. For me, it is a replacement, and it is potentially mean spirited because unlike these other two, I do think that the Audible version did it better. I would like to bring over Andy Serkis as Matthew. And I really do like Patton Oswalt as Matthew in the Netflix series, but I think Andy Serkis just brings that extra level of humanity to the character that I think should be there.
Although now that you say it, it's like I think this was like the one weak point for me, but it's kind of hard to say because it's not really a major role. It's just an extended cameo. I'd probably also say Miriam Margolyes is Despair.
Yeah, that's possible. But we haven't seen what I don't know who played
It's
her in the
Donna
Netflix.
Preston, I believe.
Yeah, we also haven't seen her like give like honestly a full performance. So I would say give that time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Jonathan's second question says two, do you think there's any chance, no matter how small, Netflix would adapt the Lock and Key crossover? I don't know much about that. Jacob, would you know anything about that?
I don't know. It's not collected in any of the Omnis.
So you are not Sandman Supreme.
No, I'm
Um,
sorry. Well, it's a Sandman universe thing.
Okay.
So it
Yeah.
wasn't
Oh
it,
yeah,
it
Sandman
wasn't written
Universe
by
came later.
Gaiman.
Yeah.
So
Um.
that's the one thing that I think rules it out, only because
Yeah,
Gaiman didn't
definitely. Yeah.
have input.
I don't think they would ever do anything like that. But I mean,
Um,
hey, who knows? It's anything's possible, I suppose.
I mean, Netflix already adapted Lock and Key to a show,
Mm.
and like I know that that was created by Stephen King's son,
Okay. That's
and
cool.
that he
Joe
also
Hill?
wrote the Sandman crossover.
Hmm.
Yeah, Mason, it's Joe Hill.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, I've never read it. It's apparently good. I wouldn't hate them doing it. It might be interesting, but I don't think they're going to. I think Neil really wants to focus on getting, because he's explicitly said he wants to get them through the 75 issues and the overture,
Mm.
um, which which I hope Netflix does. I
Yeah.
hope they like
I
the,
mean, it's number one show in how many different countries? It's
a
doing great.
lot. It's
Yeah.
doing great.
Yeah. So fingers crossed. But in the meantime, our next question I'm directing towards Mason because I think this is a reference to a tweet that you made. Uh,
Okay.
Sean Franco at Sean Franco says,
Oh,
"How good is Flint Marco in this?"
motherfucker. Well, I'm really happy you gave me the most loaded question, because I mean, there is a lot to say about this. I mean,
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
Flint Marko obviously would have been the greatest addition to this show. I think, like, if there was one thing that the show was lacking, it was Thomas Hayden Church. Um, so I think he's hiding. I
All
think
right.
if you look really close, you can see
He's
him in
there.
one shot, but
He's a
he's
few of
hiding.
those little specks of sand in there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean,
All
he's
right.
literally the sand. He's just the sand.
Our next question comes from a mutual of mine at Ellie of Horus at I of Horus underscore DW says, which major character would be the best at playing the hit game Among Us? Um, I think Desire, definitely.
That was my answer
I was gonna
too.
say,
Yeah, that
That's
was
not a
my
bad choice. Yeah.
like
I like.
I saw a game stream once. I don't remember of Among Us, and they were all accusing someone of being the killer, and it was like, oh yeah, so what if I am? What if I did it? You know, basically he leaned in so hard into admitting he was the killer that they were like, okay, this guy can't be the killer, and that is how Desire would play the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that we're
I
all in
could totally
agreement
see
on
that.
that.
Could we get a
Yeah.
game stream going though with Mason Alexander Park playing Among
You
Us
know what?
in character?
I
Tweet
like to
at
think
them.
that I like to think they would. I really do. All right, and our last Twitter question before we move into spoilers comes from Uncle Funkle at Uncle Funkle. My good friend Ian says, "Best episode, best character." All right, for each
Oh,
of us,
shoot.
one by one, give your best and best. Jacob, you start.
Okay, the best episode is episode 6, The Sound of Her Wings.
And best character. Don't try to elaborate too much because most of this will be spoiler talk. But best
Well, I
character.
was just going to say it's only because they combine two of the best issues that are adapted and do them perfectly. Um, and is it hard for me to? Do I want Death? Death is just the best character.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, for me, best episode, best character. I agree. Sound of Her Wings. Best character. I want to say Hob Gadling, but honestly, the character that I found myself enjoying the most as I was watching the series was David Thewlis as John D. So much more on that later. All right, Marcus.
Um, best episode, biased because it's my favorite story in the Sandman, is The Sound of Her Wings.
Nice.
Best character. I've said it numerous times on Twitter and stuff, but I just be really thirsty for Desire.
Great choices. Great choices. And Mason, I'm very interested to hear your answers to this.
Yeah, because like, I mean, I am gonna be the odd one. Well, I don't know, because episode 6 is really good. Episode 6 does an idea that like it's another one of those stories that takes an idea that that some people will have heard, but does something you wouldn't necessarily expect from it.
Mhm.
But the one that like, because I really enjoyed the show up to this point, but like episode 5, coming at episode 5 with no context as to what was going to happen was such a strange experience. And I'll keep details to myself, but there was partway through the episode where I was like, wouldn't it be funny if they all did this? And then they all did that, and I was like, oh,
All
Oh,
right.
wow.
I will say episode 5, which is called 24/7, is my runner-up. Like that's my very close second. So
I will
Oh,
say this question
interesting.
is like asking me to pick a favorite child. Like
fair enough. And
Um,
best
that,
character,
that, that,
Mason? Oh, sorry.
no, I
Oh,
was just gonna say that's interesting because like I didn't know what we were gonna do in this, so I actually ranked all the episodes, and my runner-up is A Hope in Hell.
Ooh, okay. Actually, I'll let you
This is
go
a
through
good
your
one.
list after Mason says his best character.
Okay.
Again, best character, that's difficult because I mean, I think I said this, but like every character was so well portrayed. Like I personally don't think there was a weak link. Um I mean, I gotta say, for a show that introduces a character like at the like not in the first couple episodes, I thought Rose Walker was established and done fantastically. Because
Nice.
usually in these kinds of shows, I don't necessarily enjoy characters that are introduced later, but that character was so well defined and by the actress whose name I cannot remember, but I think I mean, I really liked her. She was fantastic.
Nice. Fantastic. All right, Marcus, go through your full 10 episode ranking.
Okay. Before I do, just know the curve I was grading these on is the lowest an episode got for me was a 7 out of 10.
Totally fair.
So number 10 was episode 2, Imperfect Hosts. Number 9 was episode 7, The Doll's House. Number 8 was episode 8, Playing House. Number 7 was episode 1, Sleep of the Just. Number 6 was episode 9, Collectors. Number 5 was episode 3, Dream a Little Dream of Me. Number 4 was episode 5, 24/7. Number 3 was episode 10, Lost Hearts. Number 2 was A Hope in Hell. And number 1 was The Sound of Her Wings.
Fantastic. Those are some great choices. I'm a little sad Collectors isn't up a bit higher because I really like the way they did that. But all right, I guess that concludes our non-spoiler section. Let's dive right into spoilers. I'm very excited to talk spoilers. We're not going to do like a full, like complete, like here play by play. Here's all 10 episodes. Just we'll go into each episode, say like what we liked and didn't like, and sort of move on from there. Does that sound good?
yes.
All right,
Yeah,
sounds good.
that works.
All right, fantastic. All right, let's kick it off with episode 1, Sleep of the Just. So right off the bat, I think I'd really like to talk about uh pretty much like the family that this first episode focuses around, which is the Burgesses. First off, what's the older Burgess name? Shit.
Roderick.
Roderick, that's his name, is
Roderick.
played by fucking Charles Dance. And I'm so in love with that.
It is. Oh. And I mean, the first trailer for this show was literally just a sequence from this episode.
Oh yeah. Yeah, like I remember like right after that first like clip came out and they like teased the first scene thing of the Sandman, and they're like someone like put together a play by play of like, here's the shot, here's the panel from the comic, and it was just like the whole scene. It's like they just did that from the comic, and it was really
Nice.
great. Yeah. Mason, any things that like stood out to you in particular in this first episode? Because I know you said like early on, you said that that just the overall plot of it, the premise of the show sort of took you by surprise. So how was it not like what you were expecting?
Well, like I will say, I think of all the episodes, this one was probably my least favorite.
Okay.
Because as someone who had no idea like what any of these characters was like, I thought it was a bit strange to take your main character and basically have them not talk for the entire time.
Which is why I do think it was a smart choice to have Dream narrate the episode, though, because that's how
That
it
is
is.
true.
That's how it is in the comic. Like Dream is just not there until the very end. And I will say one thing that I do think the episode 1 drops the ball on is compared to the comic, the last scene where he talks to Alex Burgess, is a much longer scene in the comic. Like they really cut that scene short for some reason, and
Yeah.
also they cut down on Alex Burgess's fate, which I think is a little weird.
So can I go ahead and talk about spoilers? Because that was like one of my hangups.
Oh yeah, we're in full spoiler mode now.
Initially, because as the series went on, I was able to let go of a lot of my issues I initially had with this the start of the series. Like episode 1 was the one where I got the most hung up on the Sandman as an adaptation. Like you mentioned, Alex Burgess's fate, because in the comic, Dream places him in a nightmare that just continually plays on a never-ending
Yeah.
loop.
So like when he
Whereas
says like I give you eternal waking in the comic, he Alex wakes up and he sees like his nurse, and the nurse like starts to melt and turns into a demon or whatever, and then Alex
Holy
wakes up,
shit.
and then Alex wakes up again, and it's implied that he's gonna keep doing that forever and ever until the end of time, and it's fucking awful, and they don't
Yeah.
do
Dear
that.
God.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
in the episode, Dream just puts him in a coma.
Yeah.
And it's like that was one of my initial concerns when I started the series, because the comic goes really fucking hard, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Whereas,
This is a horror comic. This is
yeah,
a comic.
and that was my concern, because for those first few episodes, it felt like the series was restraining itself, like it was pulling its punches.
Mhm. Well, jumping forward a bit then, because I was talking with Jacob about this, I think, and they made a change to what is issue 5 in the comic, where John D is with that girl in the car and they put that into episode 4, and in the comic he kills her at the end, and in the TV show they kept her alive, and I was like, okay, so they are like sort of pulling back in certain areas, but then they do episode 5, which is the adaptation of issue 6 of the comic, and then I
Issue
realized,
6
okay,
of the comic.
and I was like, they were just waiting, like the reason they didn't kill off Rosemary is so that what John D eventually does is all the more horrifying, I think. Like they were building up to what 24/7
Yes.
is, and I really like that idea. I like as a show. I remember watching a panel for when Preacher was first coming out, and Garth Ennis and Seth Rogen were talking about the adapting process, and they were like, you can't just adapt the comic straight. A great comic is not necessarily a great TV show. And so I think for some of the changes made to the structure of the Sandman here, a lot of these changes were necessary. So you build up the horror. It slowly gets progressively more and more weird and more fucked up until you get to 24/7 and everything gets awful. Some of probably the most horrifying
Yeah.
scenes in the whole show are in that episode. So that slow buildup is there. The fact that the Corinthian is sort of the main villain of the whole show and he's there for like almost all 10 episodes. That typically he's only in what 2 or 3 issues of the comic up to that point of the first like 16 issues.
He's in the comic. He's only there when they start the Doll's House.
Yeah, and his only issue where he features heavily is collectors, and
Is
that's
collectors,
it.
yeah.
Yeah. So like building him up as this big villain throughout the show, I thought was a very smart choice, you know. And first off, more Boyd Holbrook as the Corinthian, who was fucking awesome.
I'd also say it's actually a really good way to help take the place of in adapting, because just overall, early Sandman is very entrenched in post-crisis DC universe.
Yeah, and so
Like,
this show is very
lovely.
much made like without the inclusion of the DC universe in mind, which I
Like-
would like to
like-
also mention the fact that there is DC merchandising in this show.
Yes,
I
which
noticed that. Yeah.
Yeah,
There-
like
there's a Batman toy at one point. There's an image of Captain Cold on the screen when Jed is about to do the Sandman thing from Doll's House.
there's a
and
bit
then-
where they're watching an episode of like
What was
Justice
they're
League.
they're watching Static Shock.
Yeah.
Actually. Yeah. It's crazy. I love it. Like it's fantastic. But also like you get what they're doing. Because they want this version of the Sandman to be its own thing. Like in what is it, issue 5 of the comic, like Martian Manhunter's there.
And we are at the JLA Watchtower.
Yeah.
For like a little bit.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about the Audible version then? Is that more entrenched in DC lore?
Oh yeah.
Only
yeah,
at the beginning, because like at some point, I don't know when it was, DC put the Sandman under its like spin-off label Vertigo, and that's where it really started to separate itself.
Well, it
Okay,
did
got
until
it.
the last couple of issues. And
Yeah, where I can't wait for when the Audible version does this, but they have Batman and Superman at the end there.
yeah, like
like
John D as a character is
he's
a
Dr.
Justice
Destiny.
League villain.
He's a Justice League villain. He's called Dr. Destiny. The Ruby was an old thing from the Ruby was an old thing from the comics that Neil Gaiman repurposed as Dream's Ruby that he carried with him everywhere. But because when he originally wrote the Sandman, he made it so that Dream had not been on Earth for the entire time that mainstream comics have been a thing.
Yeah.
When he came back, that Ruby was repurposed to be like, okay, well, this was actually taken from Dream, and it became Dr.
Yeah.
Destiny's.
Or like one
So
of my
yeah.
little favorites that I learned recently, Matthew was actually created in the Alan Moore Swamp Thing run.
It's true. I've read his first appearance. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say,
It's-
like, to slightly get back to episode one, like just to share with everybody how little I knew. The start of the the start of the episode happened, and I thought, oh, I didn't know that this was a period piece. That's cool. And then and then when I was like, oh, it's a slightly later period piece. Okay. And then he gets through. I'm like, oh, okay, got it. Okay, I get
It's
it.
not. It's
Got
just
it.
not a
It's
period
been a
piece.
century.
that isn't to say we won't go back to different periods in time, because I
Oh,
know
true.
that,
Yeah, well, yeah, we
like,
do a bit of that in this first season of the show too.
yeah.
But yeah, but
But
for the most part, it is a contemporary story.
I would also say, just for this first episode, because Tom Sturridge has basically no in-universe dialogue, he is physically acting, and
Oh
you can
yeah.
just
Oh yes,
Oh
absolutely.
yeah, like with the added plot point of the previous Raven before Matthew Jessamy. That
I loved that. Oh, I thought that was so good.
Yeah,
yeah.
I
It also
that was
just adds
fun.
this great layer of like Dream did have emotions pre-captivity, and did at least understand some bits of humanity, especially since like the first issue of the comic, you're not seeing much of Dream. He's not there. You don't really get a handle on who Dream is until issue 2.
Hmm.
But
yeah.
because
Um,
That's interesting.
There
yeah.
is one other thing I want to say about that, but I want to wait till we get to like start talking about the Doll's House arc and specifically the sort of new / changed character of Galt.
Mhm. So
yes,
what I'd like to talk about now for Mason's sake is, first off, we're going to move into episode 2 in a second, but also for how this show was split up and what it's comprised of is it's made up of the first 2 arcs of the comic. So when you mentioned that like Rose Walker is a character that's brought up later in the show, it's just that she's the start of the second arc
yes.
of the comic. So
Because I'm sorry. You can go ahead.
no, you're good. I was just gonna say like this collects like the first 2 volumes of the comic minus 1 issue that they excluded, which I'm sure they'll do in season 2.
That is how
Um,
season 2 is going to open. Mark my words.
but
That's fair.
but episodes like 1 through 6 is Preludes and Nocturnes, and episodes 7 through 10 is like the Doll's House, and that's how they sort of ordered the show. But like I said, for the sake of adapting, they expanded certain characters' roles from the Doll's House into Preludes and Nocturnes. So like the Corinthian and like Matthew. So Matthew isn't there until way late in the Doll's House. Actually he's there in the Doll's House, but he doesn't actually do anything until like the second to last
Yeah.
issue.
He
Um,
also just he also just doesn't really, I don't think, really becomes a more interesting character until we start really exploring the dreaming itself.
See,
Way down.
I love him in the last issue of the Doll's House in the original comic.
Yeah, but
I love what he does for Rose there.
he doesn't
But
really shine though until in the comic, until Seasons of Mist happens, and you have this whole sequence of stuff just set in the dreaming itself. Um, and that's where you meet other characters like Merv.
yes, yeah, another character that they bumped up the inclusion of. So yeah, so just to give Mason an idea of like how they adapted the comic into the series. But let's move on to episode 2, Imperfect Hosts. We meet Cain and Abel here, and I will
Yeah.
I will say one thing that I like. If we're talking about like bringing other adapted versions of these characters over here, I'm not like a sticker for like, oh yeah, like Tom Ellis should have been Lucifer, whatever. But I love the Lucifer show, and just a small part of me wanted Tom Welling as Kane here, just and for like Abel to almost be like Michael Rosenbaum, because I think that would have been perfect. But I like what they did here. I like the actors they cast for those roles. Also, we really get into Lucienne here. We really meet her. So any big takeaways from this episode? Obviously, Cain and Abel are there.
Oh, there
Yeah,
is one
that was
because
such a
as the series goes on, it's going to become a huge thing. I loved the portrayal of the Hecate.
Mm, absolutely. Yeah, I love what they did with them.
but yeah, just like the again, like all I can really say is like I had no idea what was happening, and then Cain and Abel show up, and they're living in their like nice little neighborhood,
Yeah.
and Cain is constantly killing Abel, and he's like, it happens from time to time, it's
Yeah.
fine.
It's just the way things are. He's the first murderer. I'm the first victim. That's it. Yeah.
That's so interesting. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's a great idea. I always loved that. But like I said, we get to meet Lucian a bit more here. Any big takeaways from oh God, I can't think of the actress's name now. Vivian, I don't know how to pronounce her last name. I'm not even gonna bother because I'm gonna butcher that, and I would feel bad. But yeah, she's great. I think as Lucian, we mentioned her briefly before.
I thought she. I mean, I think Marcus already said this, but she absolutely is like the mother of the series, and
Mm.
I like how obviously a librarian she looks.
Oh yeah,
Like she
yeah,
just has this air about her that screams, "Oh, I hang out with books all the time."
yeah. Books are my best friend.
Absolutely.
Don't come near me and
But
my
yeah, just
books.
like when I kind of call her like the mom of the show or the mom of everyone in the Dreaming, it's because that Vivian just portrays that perfect mom combination of caring and concerned and done with everyone's shit.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
totally. But yeah, I guess there's not too much to say on episode 2. It's the shortest episode of the show. It's only like 30 some minutes, right? Um, yeah, it's there, but it's cool. It's great to get to know Dream's character better. I like the way the show adapted it, and you get to see more Tom Sturridge in the role. He's fantastic. But let's talk a little bit more about episode 3, Dream a
Actually,
Little Dream of Me. Oh, sorry.
before we get to that, I will say, should we talk a bit about the Fates because they were introduced in episode 2, aren't they?
Yeah, I talked about them very briefly because I used one of their other names, the Hecate.
Oh, sorry, got it. I don't
No,
know
it's
anything about
okay.
these characters.
Or as they briefly refer to themselves later in the show, the Kindly Ones, which, I mean, I don't want to spoil anything, but will become important, But
Nice.
yeah, so there's that. Yeah, so we meet them. But yeah, they play a much bigger role in the show
I
later.
think too, now that I think about it, in episode 2 we have another character whose role was expanded from the comics. Jolie Richardson is Ethel Cripps.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a character that's just barely there in the comics. She's there to die. Like,
Yeah.
so Mason, so they made this connection between what is issues 1 and 5 of the comic. So Ethel she's not even actually in issue 1, is she? Of the comic, like, she's not a character there.
Hmm.
Um, and but
That's
yeah, she's an actual character there. She is instead so for the show they made her the mother of John Dee, which I think is like vaguely implied. But not to the degree that it is here in the show. So she's John Dee's mother here. So Marcus, how did you feel about that connection made between like episodes issues 1 and 5, episodes 1 and 5 of the Audible version? It's weird to actually discuss the numbering order of anything here.
Yeah, no,
But
it's gonna be weird. Just um I really like it because even though in the comics we barely meet her, it is this idea that ultimately her death is what kind of um sets John Dee off from, breaking out of prison. In the comics it's Arkham Asylum, but it's like her death is really what begins motivating him. So I do like that they expanded on her character so that her death does have more of an impact.
Oh yeah, definitely. I like that first off they just gave her an actual character because, like I said, she's barely there in the comic. And actually, Mason, here's a fun thing for you with when it comes to John Dee's character and how he's used and how his mother is used.
Bet.
So John Dee in the comics, like we said, originally in the comics, the Sandman is part of the larger DC universe. John Dee is in Arkham Asylum in the comics.
Really?
Yeah, and a character that he's like with a lot of the time is the Scarecrow from Jonathan Crane's Scarecrow. So he's
That's
there. Yeah,
fascinating.
so he's there when like John Dee is first broken out and when he's brought back in. So yeah, it's just interesting to have that little connection there and like see how they change it here. But also to give like Ethel that bigger role in the show, and that I do like that they changed. All right, so now I want to move into episode 3, Dream a Little Dream of Me. This, of course, being the episode with Joanna Constantine as played by Jenna Coleman. And a great episode for me as a huge Hellblazer fan because they did even more like Hellblazer related stuff than the original comic even did, which I really like. But Mason, as someone who's what was your history with like Constantine as a character going into this?
Nothing. This was my first introduction to the character.
Oh, okay, cool. Did you know anything about them?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
I heard the name go up because I mean we talk a lot outside of this, and the name has been brought up. Isn't actually no? I know one thing. Doesn't he like age with his comic or something?
In the original Hellblazer run, yeah, in the original like 300 issues, like yeah, like when the series eventually ended in 2013, like he was as old as he should have been at that time from when he was first created.
Got it. Okay, then
Yeah.
yeah. This the version from this show is the first version of this character that I ever experienced.
That's cool. That's good. So what do you make of the character, like having experienced them for the first time?
I can see why they're so like. Granted, I don't know how much they changed for the show, but I can see why the character is so well loved.
Mm.
Because like you can do so many interesting things with a character who spends all their time. I mean, I assume they spend most of their time demon hunting.
That's
And
yeah.
Like I thought Jenna Coleman was fantastic in this role personally. Like I thought she played jaded, and like she also played a contentment with her jadedness that I thought was really interesting. And
Mhm.
as we get towards like the end of the episode and she sees like what one of her actions caused, you know, her leaving the sandbag with her ex.
Well, what was
We
really
see
cool,
that.
actually, what was really cool actually with this version of the story is that they actually include, like I said, they included more Hellblazer stuff in this than the original comic did. But you mentioned like her contentment with her jadedness, and that sort of event that you're talking about that they reference in her past with the kid being taken away. In the original comic, and I imagine that's how they would portray it in the show too. Is that like pretty much like Constantine fucked up, and Constantine let a kid's soul get dragged to hell by a demon, and that was sort of like one of those defining Constantine moments that like pretty much like any moment after that, like he says like anything bad that happens to me I pretty much deserve because I've done this awful thing. This shouldn't have happened. I should have been able to save her. And so they play on that here. Actually, they do mention it briefly in the original comic. They at the end of the original issue, Constantine mentions that they keep having dreams ever since Newcastle, which is where the kid's soul was taken. And so they mentioned that briefly in the comic, but they actually expanded on that here, which I really liked.
They also, what I found out interestingly is the priest character takes her name from a character created by Garth Ennis, Rick the Vic.
Oh my fucking god! I
Did
know
that just click for you?
That did just click for me. Wow. Okay.
So then, because you're the prominent Hellblazer expert, Joey, does Mad Hetty have a prominent role in the Sandman, or is she another Hellblazer thing?
I believe yes, actually, yeah. Okay. Also a Garth Ennis thing, if I remember correctly. Let me just make sure I'm right about that.
I know Mad Hetty shows up in a later issue of the Sandman, a little bit. Also, Mad Hetty is played by Claire Higgins.
Yes.
Yes, she
is.
Oh yeah.
And she's again this. I sadly didn't mention with the last episode. This entire show, I love the way they cast a lot of people with just character actors, like names that you're going to recognize them even if you don't necessarily know them by name. Like
Okay, wait, sorry. So okay, I was mistaken about that. Mad Hetty, I think was only a Sandman thing. I thought I remembered the character from a Hellblazer thing, but no, I'm thinking of someone else. But yeah, I do know Rick the Vic. Okay, so I didn't realize that was meant to be the same character, or at least a version of the character.
They at least took the name.
Yeah,
I don't think they probably took the personality because
no,
it's a Garth Ennis creation.
Yeah. Okay, to be fair though, Garth Ennis Hellblazer is more restrained than regular Garth Ennis. So
okay,
I will say
yes. But what I think is again especially interesting is just how well Coleman can play the role. Even if you already kind of know the character, like it took me a little bit to get into it. Just as an actress, she's great, and I didn't think they were gonna do some of the darker stuff from that issue, but they do.
But Jacob. Are
you gonna bring up that tweet?
But Jacob.
Tweet. What is this tweet?
Twitter told me that Joanna Constantine being a bad person is biphobic.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember that tweet.
Look.
Look, it's just
not to talk over the one
just
LGBTQ person in this call right now, but no, you're not understanding how to read media, and I think Marcus, as a pan person, will agree with me.
Yeah, no,
Like,
come on.
no correlation.
also, is there anyone in the Sandman really who isn't like a child character who is fully a good person? Like, maybe Unity Kincaid?
Maybe. Yeah, but that's because she didn't fucking have a life.
Yeah.
She literally had to be asleep forever.
Yeah, no, it's like one of the things that I'm sure we'll talk about as we go on is that even though he's the main character, Morpheus is not a good person.
No.
Oh, absolutely not.
You know what? Death is a truly good person.
Yes.
That's a good fucking person right there. That's.
It makes me so sad, Joey, that you haven't read the Death miniseries.
I know. Look, when the third omnibus becomes at a reasonable price and something that is on the closer to the top of my reading list, then I will get that. So, anyway, but yeah, I mean that's most of what I want to talk about in episode 3 is just how they used Constantine as a character. Sorry to those that get annoyed by the pronunciation. I keep switching back and forth between Constantine and Constantine. I can't choose. Also, just to briefly mention the Audible version, Taron Egerton plays Constantine in the Audible version, and he's fucking amazing. Like, yeah,
that would be interesting.
He is so fucking good. And as someone who's like, like Matt Ryan is like the John Constantine, like nobody else can play the fucking character. Like Taron Egerton fucking killed it.
Again, we've had 3 amazing casting choices for this role.
Yeah.
I also think I also love just how they added more scenes with Ethel Cripps and John Dee. Just especially in like this episode, the next episode, they made Ethel Cripps like a more fleshed out character because she's kind of.
We talked about that with episode 2 because really the major driving force for John Dee is his mother dying.
Yeah. And she's barely a character in the original. She's hardly ever there. So the fact that they increased her role, I really like, and that's prevalent throughout these couple episodes here, these first few. But let's move on to episode 4, A Hope in Hell. This is, of course, the big Lucifer episode, and I gotta say, I knew they weren't going to do any DC things, but that didn't mean they couldn't take some liberties. Part of me thought for just a second that they were going to do Etrigan. Just for a brief second, I really thought they were going to do Etrigan, and I'm not going to lie, I was a little sad when they didn't.
I was kind of hoping they would at least like maybe hand wave Etrigan a little bit.
At least have a rhyming demon in there.
And they sadly didn't. So, Mason, Etrigan the Demon is a DC character created by one Jack Kirby. And his deal is like, he's a demon that shares a body with a human, and he rhymes. And he is a delightful character.
Yes.
Wait, I thought there was a rhyming character at the start of the episode, wasn't there?
That was Squatterbolt. That was a character from the issue. And that's why we thought maybe they do it and they just give Etrigan's dialogue.
I thought for a second, like when the demons first started coming out of the shadows, I was like, oh, they're gonna do Etrigan, fuck yeah, but they didn't, and I was unfortunately let down, but it's all right, we're good. I got through it. I got Gwendolyn Christie instead, which is perfectly fine.
From the second she shows up on Scream, from that initial hello, she is intimidating as hell.
Yeah.
Unintended.
One big change I really like they made to this story is that Lucifer is directly the one that goes into the battle with Dream. Instead, in the comic, another demon is called forth to participate in that battle.
The demon that does the battle is the demon that's told to help Corazon, who in the Audible version is played by Patterson Joseph.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I can also say, so episodes 2 through 6 were directed by Jamie Childs.
Yes. More Doctor Who things.
Doctor Who things. I love the way he just directed the entire battle sequence. Like,
oh yeah, like my favorite thing. I was watching this whole series with my brother, who like knew certain things that I talked about from when I was reading the Sandman, and like he just knew there was a battle, and I was like, did they ever tell you how this battle goes? And he's like, no. I was like, as long as they keep it mostly the same, like you're in for a treat. And they did. Like that's just ripped straight from the comic. Like
Yeah.
it's a battle of wits. It's a battle of who is able to outthink the other.
It's also
And
like the first time where I think the point of the Sandman in the comic and in the show really shines through, that that this is all about stories and why we tell them.
mhm.
Um,
Episode 4 is also the first time in the series that they kept a really famous line from the comic fully intact. It's the whole for what is it? Oh fuck, I can't think of the line. The line where he
What
says
power have dreams in hell? And
yeah, what power have dreams in hell. It's the whole like if they cannot dream of heaven, whatever, that whole line. They kept that line fully intact
Oh
from the
yeah,
comic, and it's such a perfect line. Um, and
so good.
and I think also in making Lucifer the one that directly battles Dream here, you really set up Lucifer's hatred for Dream and what will eventually become their
yeah.
rivalry if they do
and
continue to adapt the stories that they're going
yeah,
to.
and too, because people also uploaded clips on YouTube, and I read the comments, and like they brought up a good point, and Gwendolyn Christie's performance just nails it when he says that. It's like, what power? Oh God, it's like, what power would there be in hell over those who dream of heaven? Just who dreams of heaven more than Lucifer?
Mhm. Oh yeah,
And it's like when he says that,
That's a
the
good point.
devastation on her face.
yeah. Oh, it's so good, so fucking good. Yeah, Gwendolyn Christie fucking nailed it. Truly great performance. Also in this episode, we adapt issue 5 right alongside it with the whole
Passengers.
passengers. John D hitches a ride with Rosemary,
Now,
and
what's interesting about
Mm.
so Passengers as an issue is one that has accidentally aged not as well as it could have. Uh, Mainly because this is the late 80s. The AIDS crisis is still a thing. So this Rosemary is terrified of Dr. John D initially because she is convinced he is an AIDS victim.
it's also worth noting, Mason, that in
Oh,
the comic, John D does not look like a normal person.
Yes. He is
He
like
is all gray and shriveled up and naked and is just clutching on to this ruby for dear life.
yes.
got it.
Nowhere near
Because
as charismatic either. Like
Yeah, like Thulis plays the character as charismatic, which is honestly I think what makes 24/7 work so well when we get to that episode. Um, but yeah, so like very different from the comic, but a change that I really think worked for the series.
they also added quite a lot to the actual car ride because it's in the comic.
Mhm.
It's fairly short. A lot of that issue is dedicated to Dream trying to find the ruby by going to the Justice League. Uh,
Oh
and
yeah, because that's the whole Martian Manhunter thing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and it's a whole thing that like excising it. Well, it's kind of a sad loss because Martian Manhunter's cool and all, um, but it's like okay, this does like it doesn't push the story forward, especially because like keeping D one step ahead of Dream in the show works so much better for the show and the medium
Mhm.
of television. Because the way it
Yeah.
plays out in the comic is Dream gets to the warehouse where the ruby is stored first, realizes it's corrupted, and then D attacks him. Um, Whereas it's just a little plays out just ever so slightly differently here. Uh,
Mhm.
and we don't keep as much of Dream on the sidelines.
Yeah.
Uh, I also, I love the choice to have just to have D keep Rosemary alive.
Yeah. I really,
yeah,
really like that
It
choice
that's
also
really
kind
actually.
of
sweet.
works.
Yeah,
It also kind of works because they couldn't use the DC version of him. They had to entirely rebuild his character because, in the comic, he's just a supervillain. But here, like, he is essentially a broken man with a destroyed mind. So, which is where his whole philosophy comes in the show.
Mhm.
yeah. Like one thing I love, and I mean, I guess we get into more of it with episode 5, but I love the slow burn as to what kind of a person John D will become as a
Mhm.
result of a person with his philosophy given the power that he has. Because like
Yeah.
at first I just think, oh, it's sweet. This woman's like wanting to be nice to this guy. That's like that's awesome. But then the car ride goes on a little bit more and he talks about, oh yeah, like I mean I had to kill a couple people, but it's fine, it's great. And
Yeah.
then you get the scene in the like all the deaths that happen as a result of him are not necessarily because of him at first. It's because it's violence being acted upon him that causes deaths to happen, which I think is
Mhm.
so interesting
Yeah,
to
and
as a concept to set up your villain.
and it's why I think
Villain
24/7. We're gonna move into episode 5 in a second here, but it's why I think 24/7 hits so hard in the show because they didn't explicitly portray D as a horrible person before then.
Oh, most definitely.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think it's also just important to note that sort of that issues like just the two plot lines do kind of parallel each other. They are kind of our two focal characters descending into hell. Um, Morpheus going into a literal hell, whereas D is going into this metaphorical hell that he's back out in the world, and now is actually seeing the world as this rotten place. And there's some real, just the really interesting commentary on, people lie, uh, people are greedy. Why can't people really just be nice to each other? And David Thewlis,
Oh my god, yeah.
like the man is such a versatile actor.
Mhm.
Um, like he can portray so much. Again, portraying so much with just a look.
Oh
And
yeah.
they,
I mean, which is what the whole next episode is about,
yeah,
is I mean, let's
Yeah.
just move into it. Episode 5,
so
24/7. I want to turn this over to Mason. I'm sorry I'm making you like the star of this episode, Mason, but
That's fine.
I really want to hear your thoughts on this. So you didn't know what you were in for, right? Like you had no clue what was about to happen.
Yeah, literally nothing. I was like, okay, so
Did
he's in
did
a
you even know
diner.
that? Did anyone even say to you like did Jacob or anyone say to you like just watch out or like just
I
be
told him
aware?
I want to know you. He told me he was going into episode 5. Like, I need your immediate reactions to this episode.
And
Mm.
like, I'll be honest, I just thought that was like a normal thing that you do whenever I ingest media you want me to ingest, because like you do that whenever I read the Wheel of Time. So I just thought,
Yes.
okay, he just wants to know my reaction. So I'm
Yeah,
watching this
totally
episode,
normal
and
Jacob Licklider thing. Yeah.
Yes, which is totally normal Jacob Licklider things, but it works so well because, well, it's
like,
24/7.
yeah, and I'll give a sort of play by play, like, well, like condensed, but I'll tell you like what I was thinking as I was watching this. So he goes into this diner, and he meets all these nice people, and after a while, I was like, man, we are really getting to know a lot of really random side characters. Like, what is this? This has to be for something. And then he grips his little gem, and I'll be honest, he becomes such a terrifying villain, and he just sits there, and
Mhm. Oh
he
yeah.
is terrifying. And he grips his little like gem, and then all of a sudden everyone starts telling the truth, and I'm like, okay, so this is going to be like a bit of a reversal. And I mentioned this earlier, but like I said, I thought, wouldn't it be funny if they just all just like started having sex or something, and then they all started having sex. I was like, what the fuck? And
Yep.
he just takes ice cream from the freezer and
Yep.
starts eating it.
Yeah.
And he looks so sad.
He does. Oh my god, as he passes by. I love the way that's shot. Oh my god, who directed this episode?
It
There
was
was
Jamie
also something.
Childs.
Jamie Childs.
There
Oh my
was
god.
something really subtle I noticed too, because it doesn't go as hard this episode as the comic does, but like
Oh god.
he's able to exert his influence beyond the diner. Like in the comic, he's also able to exert his influence on a newscast as well, and you do get a little glimpse of that.
Mhm.
You
I
see
was
it,
I
but
was
it's
wondering that like
I was
while the episode was happening, I was like, is the world exploding outside? Because you keep
yes.
hearing these news things like,
Yes.
what the hell is happening?
Yeah, like so in the comic, like there's this children's TV show with like a man and a dinosaur. But it's like, oh, the dino wants you to slit your wrists. Remember, up and down, kids, so we can go to the morgue or something to that effect. It's
Holy
dark.
shit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
And-
as intense as this episode is, and it's amazing. I am kind of glad it cuts out some of the more messed up stuff from the
Oh
comic.
yeah.
Like
I keep saying I keep saying
content
like
warning.
I keep
Content warning here, really quick. I am really, because there's a scene in the comic where D has them all sit in a circle and confess their darkest secrets, and one of the women confesses she's a necrophiliac. I'm really glad that was cut.
Oh my.
I keep saying like one of the big sequences they cut from the comic, but like it was at a point in the episode where I was like, okay, they could have this sequence here, but honestly, they don't need to. It's a sequence where they all start worshiping John D as their god.
Oh
And
yeah. I like it's so human that they all turn on him.
Yeah.
in the show.
Yeah, but yeah, they'll start like worshiping him as their god after he reveals the truth to them. That scene also involves naked teenager, and
Yeah.
one can imagine why they didn't want that here. So there's
Uh,
that.
It's also, but they keep a lot of the gore, like the cutting off of the fingers,
Mhm.
Oh my
just
gosh,
The
yeah.
nailing of the
nail.
hand, yeah, the eyes and all that, yeah. Which, by the way, on the eye thing, I love how they brought that back around to the Corinthian and connected those two plot lines.
ever so slightly. Yeah, it was.
I love that. I think it's so cool.
One
But yeah.
thing that didn't dawn on me until I saw it in this adaptation, how they overlaid it, is that Dee made 3 of his victims his own twisted version of the Hecate. And it
Oh,
never dawned on me in the Audible version until until I watched this episode, and he had them and they started overlaying each other.
Huh.
oh yeah, because it's
That's
there. It's in
fascinating.
that worshiping him sequence, Joey. In the
Yeah,
comic, he's trying
that's
to do the
right.
Hecate, but they're not the actual Hecate. And the Hecate just, obviously they like because you actually have cast 3 physical actresses and can actually, cut them in. Just adding that makes it all the darker. I also one thing I'm surprised they kept was the fact that Judy hit her girlfriend.
Yeah.
Like that is a big
Mm.
thing from the comics that people were like, that is aged terribly. The first explicitly queer character in this series, and they're an abusive, and they're abusive, and they also die.
Hmm.
They kept both of those elements, and I
Yeah.
think I think it helped. I think not allowing. I think allowing anyone to survive the 24-hour diner because they all die in the end.
Hmm.
Um,
But also because they combined this adaptation with Sound and Fury, which is issue 7 of the comic, and I really like that because in the comic, because the two stories aren't connected and Dream isn't aware of the diner and what's happened there, he doesn't comment on those people at all. But in the show,
Mm.
he has this gorgeous speech about these people and their hopes and dreams and whatever. And I love what they did with that. Just combining those two issues into one episode really made for a great combined experience.
it
And
also helps since like issue 7 is very abstract. Like,
Mhm. Which, by the way, they kept the abstraction. Like, I always think like one of the most striking pages of the comic is when I flip the page and I see just a completely white page and John Dee very tiny standing at the middle. And they kept that. It's there. Fucking
Oh, yeah.
Dream holding John Dee in his hand is right there. Like they kept all that. It's brilliant. I love it.
There was a little like moment during the episode where I felt a little bad in hindsight because all of these people were dying in these horrific ways, and then it cuts to the waitress like shredding her book, and that's the thing that made me go, "Oh no, that sucks!" Like all
Of
these
all the things,
people are
that's the one.
dying.
That's the bad one.
I think
I did
anyone who's
actually
listened
have that.
to the Audible version will just hear Neil Gaiman in their head. This is Betty. She thinks herself a writer. All of her stories have happy endings.
Mm. Oh,
Like,
And
it's
it
so good.
and
And
it's
I also
also
made
interesting.
Holy
also made
shit!
it's worth noting that like most of the issue is done through narration. Like you don't there's not a ton of dialogue in the original issue. So like it's all done as like, like
That makes
here's what happens
sense.
this hour. John D watches as this happens, this happens, this happens. It's now this
I
time,
love
this
that.
happens, whatever.
and,
Um,
and they're all like, it's like our whatever, and there's always like a pity title, like The Flies Walk into the Web,
mhm.
Party Games.
I
Like,
remember when you first
I
started
did
watching the
start.
episode, Jacob, because I think I had finished the series here first between the four of us, and I remember when you sat down to watch 24/7, you messaged me like the first thing you said is you watching it, you're like the flies walk into the web, and it's just like it's great. I love it.
yeah.
And
Well, because also just I knew it was coming. I'm like day one. I sit down and watch episodes 1 to 4. I'm like, it's midnight. I'm like, episode 5 is called 24/7.
I almost had a similar experience because I was watching through it with my brother, but day one we did it to Sound of Her Wings, which is a much better way to end. So we did
Yeah,
the first six in one
yeah.
day. So that was
Mm.
that was pretty good. I like that.
and there one thing I want to comment on too, because again, because the way the series restructured John Dee, and he has this whole philosophy about truth and lies, and then you have Dream come in before their confrontation and talk about some of the hopes and aspirations of some of the people that died. It's like it restructures the Sound and Fury half of this episode into this narrative about dreams versus reality, which I thought was really clever.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
But like honestly, like
Yeah.
the Netflix version of Sound and Fury is better than the comic.
Oh yeah, the
Like-
issue in the comic is that it's Gaiman trying to wrap something up that he hasn't quite gotten a hold of yet. Like, there's a reason.
And then granted, he's able to put it all in perspective in issue 8 with Sound of Her Wings.
Yeah.
But like Sound and Fury, well, a solid issue. It's other than like a few striking pages, it's not going to absolutely blow you away. I think.
Yeah. And interestingly,
your mind had already been blown in issue 6. Yeah.
the original plan for doing the trades of the Sandman, the first trade they released was the Doll's House, and they were originally for Preludes and Noctunes. They were going to end it at 7, and the Doll's House like started with 8 with Sound of Her Wings, just that trade. So it just hits differently.
I will say though, like 24/7 as an episode feels like a mid-season finale. Like if we're talking like a TV show, like you even tease the Doll's House by having Desire show up at the end there. Like it's, I think it works really well. And then you start off with a very fresh, clean slate, fresh start with Sound of Her Wings, sort of recapping what's happened in the past 5 episodes. It works really well as like a split in the season, and I really like it.
Yes,
but yeah, I guess let's talk about episode 6 now. I think most of our favorites.
Yes.
Being Sound of Her Wings, this combines 2 of the very best issues of the Sandman, Sound of Her Wings and Men of Good Fortune.
So what's interesting is that we've been doing issues chronologically. This is where it breaks with chronology in the way it's presented.
Because Men of Good Fortune is what?
13.
13, that's
it
right.
is smack dab in the middle of the Doll's House. Like that story is broken up so weirdly. And the Audible also does the smart choice of moving it forward.
Yeah.
There it's the 10th episode because they do an issue an episode.
Actually, because we're talking about things that are spliced into the Doll's House, or at least before the Doll's House. Mason, what did you make of the one bit in Hope in Hell when Dream walks by that one prisoner who sees him differently?
Oh yeah, that was quite random to me. But
I would imagine
larger, like because I know that the story goes into a lot of flashbacks, and I'm assuming that that's alluding to something that I will learn about later on.
Yeah.
So her backstory,
which is interesting because they released a screenshot of those 2 versions of Dream and Nada together. And Jacob shared that with me, and it's like, oh, they're doing Tales in the Sand. I was like, oh shit, really? That's weird.
Joey and I had both predicted that they were probably going to cut Men of Good Fortune and Tales in the Sand.
But they did Men of Good Fortune, which I'm not complaining about.
I'm not complaining, but
but it's
so Tales in the Sand is issue 9, and it is basically all of a flashback that gives you Nada's backstory. And it ties into stuff.
I suppose we shouldn't say too much about it since Mason doesn't know about it. But yeah, so that gives sort of like their backstory. But they were teased like originally before. Like that scene is part of Hope in Hell in the comic. But I just think it's interesting that they kept it there if they weren't going to do Tales in the Sand.
I think it's another thing. It's like we need a season 2. Netflix, give us a season 2.
Yeah,
it seems likely because I mean, Neil Gaiman's been very much tweeting about like, we know what we want to do with season 2. It's just we need the green light and we're ready to go. And
I mean, fuck, like Jacob, I would watch a full 10 episode extended adaptation of Season of Mists. They could totally, and you just need Tales in the Sand as a prologue. That's it.
Yeah,
that's all you need.
Or the other thing I think of, because you say do Tales in the Sand as a prologue, or do the dinner scene and then have that flash back to Tales in the Sand.
Ooh, that'd be. You could put those 2 issues together. Ooh, that could really work.
That would work. I also think if they're gonna do I think they will actually include some of the Volume 3 stuff. I won't go too much into that.
Look, all I want is Dream of a Thousand Cats. That's all I want. Please give me Dream of a Thousand Cats. That's
a very interesting title.
It's about cats. Like
it's about cats.
Wow.
It's about cats from the perspective of cats,
and it is wonderful.
It's
interesting.
And Neil Gaiman wrote it because he loves cats.
Drawing us back in because we're now just geeking out about Sandman stuff in general.
Oh, and Calliope. I want to see Calliope because it's a problematic story that I think could be retold and whatever. Anyway, All right, let's fuck. What are we talking about? The Sound of Her Wings. That's it. Okay, so Mason, we've already talked a fair bit about the Sound of Her Wings portion of this in our non-spoiler section and up to this point, but I want to talk about the Men of Good Fortune section, which I'm sure I don't need to say like where it splits because you can tell where it splits.
Yeah.
So what I just want to know what you made of that half of the episode because I it's one of my favorite single stories from the comic. Thoughts?
It was intriguing because, like I said, it's a story that, like, as a Doctor Who fan, I've seen a similar plot thread happen, like a character who is all of a sudden immortal and they don't age and they just live forever, and this character keeps meeting up with them. But the way that they do it in this show is very interesting because obviously, like, your first thought is, oh, they're gonna go crazy because they're just not dying, and you get a little taste of that with one of the like meetups, but
Oh, and I love the way they played that scene. I love
yeah,
that
it was like,
when Dream is like, "Oh, so you're ready to die now," and he's like, "Are you kidding?" You know, he's like, "I have so much to live for. It's fucking great."
and like I remember watching the episode and they have a fight in the 1800s version, and that's the moment I remember. Oh God, he's been kidnapped for 100 years.
Mhm.
Oh no, he's gonna miss the meetup.
So
Yeah.
what's interesting is like in the original comic, the idea is that he comes back just in time to meet Hob Gadling
Oh
again
yeah,
in
because it was made in
1988.
the eight, and it was made in the
Yeah.
80s.
So he comes back like exactly when he's supposed to meet him. So like in the middle of the doll's house, he goes, "I have a prior engagement." He goes, and the next issue is the prior engagement, and he goes to see Hob Gadling, and
And it still ends on the line. It is
yes,
impolite to leave one's friends
yeah. So,
waiting.
so the dialogue is just like Hob Gadling's like, "Oh, I was beginning to think you weren't going to show up," and Dream says like, "I've been told it's impolite to keep one's friends waiting." But
I mean,
I think the
in
scene still
updating it, I like that he misses that meeting and then he comes back later.
yeah, I do really like that, definitely.
It also just hits the whole point that this is Dream has made a genuine friend.
With a
And
mortal.
Yeah, and I
It's
love
not
that.
one of his siblings. It's not some godly entity, whatever. It's just a mortal, someone that he has found company with, and I love
And
that. I
like I
love that
said,
idea.
like I said earlier, there's a thing I'm going to talk about when we get into the Doll's House arc. That I think the series does really well over the comics or the Audible adaptation, and Men of Good Fortune is kind of pivotal to that.
Fair enough.
I will say, real fast. I remember finishing episode 5 and thinking, did the show just end? Like, what the and then I got to this episode. I'm like, oh, I get it. We're on the next arc. I see.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, also just both serve as such a good epilogue and a good prep.
Yeah.
I also love that Sound of Her Wings didn't pull any of its punches either.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
Like
Yeah.
I had told
I mean,
Mason
the only
coyly.
scene it cut, and I was kind of hoping they would still do that scene is the comedian scene. I love that bit.
Yeah, that's
Where
Oh, what
it's,
I think
it,
I like what they replaced it with even more.
it's a great bit though, Mason. In the comic, there's a bit where there's this girl on stage. She's a comedian. She's playing in a comedy club, and the wire is like loose or whatever, and it like shocks her and kills her in the middle of her act. And she's like, I could have had a career or whatever. And like Death says, yeah, that's just how it is. You know, it's not like you don't get any more just because your career was just getting started. But I always like that scene.
But they keep the scene that hits the hardest, and that is
The baby.
The fucking
Yeah,
baby.
Fun. Okay, so fun fact about myself. That is like one of the few things that like I almost can't deal with when it comes to fiction. Like babies being hurt or babies being in like pain or whatever, just because like I have a lot of siblings who are babies, and I obviously babies look the same, so it's hard to not put them in. But back to the episode, they cut it at the perfect point for me perfectly.
Oh,
Like,
see that bit's in the comic. You hear the mother reacting to it, or you
oh
see the
God.
dialogue of the mother reacting to it.
Oh,
And also
fuck.
before Death takes the baby away, when she's talking to it, the baby actually has dialogue responding to Death.
and you can tell what the dialogue is basically. That's all I get.
Yeah.
Oh,
And she's like, "Yep, I'm afraid so." And she like takes the baby away, but then
that's
you
so
see the dialogue
sad.
of the mother reacting, and I am glad the show cut it because I was not okay.
Yeah.
Oh my
But
Yeah,
gosh.
no, it's just like be ready, Mason, because I think from this point on, every death story is gonna make you cry.
Oh
Well,
yeah.
Great.
I mean, if they really are straying from the fact that they're not doing the DC universe, then they're probably going to cut the one with a
Which
facade.
No, here's the thing. I realize that they're gonna cut Facade because she gives her, when everyone's gone, I'm just gonna turn out the lights, stack up the chairs on the table monologue that she gives in Facade. She gave it in that episode.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, I'm genuinely sad about, because I do love Facade. It's one of my favorite issues just in general, and I think it's one that's misunderstood. It's and I'm sure in the actual podcast when we cover the Sandman itself, I'll have my corner to go on my why Facade is good actually. Rant.
Facade is good. I like Facade. It's not one of my absolute favorite death stories.
Um,
I think I like the her last like actual death centric one towards the end.
yeah, but
Yeah.
she's
But I'm just gonna say, because we won't get to it for a while. 3 Septembers and a January.
ooh yes.
Okay. Yeah. But also on the Men of Good Fortune segment, Mason, we see Joanna Constantine, or at least an ancestor of Joanna Constantine, who's also named Joanna Constantine, back in the
No,
past.
I think
Oh,
the
yeah.
differentiation is Joanna Constantine and Lady Joanna Constantine.
There we go. Lady Joanna
Lady
Constantine
of
shows
course.
up. So what did you make of that? Because obviously it's a little weirder in this case because they're obviously played by the same actress and she plays the character fairly similarly. Whereas like obviously typically you would have a male version and a female version and one is clearly the ancestor.
Oh, so in the comics, it is Lady Jo. Okay, got it.
Oh yeah, Lady
Okay.
Joanna Constantine is a character from the comics, which is why when they first announced the casting of Jenna Coleman, me and Jacob were both like, okay, so they're doing Lady Joanna, but they haven't announced John yet. But we didn't know that they were going to do Joanna for both versions.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. I liked it because I thought that it was a little scene and it could come across as a bit like random, like, oh, this character is just back all of a sudden. But like you think about it and it adds so much history to her family as like they've always been doing this.
Yeah.
And I also love that someone catches on that these two people randomly like show up every 100 years, which is impressive. And they like, I think they do a good job of like portraying like, this is the moment, we got them. And then like, because like for the audience it's been 2 minutes, but for these characters it's been 100 years, and they're very much like, haha, we've caught
Yeah.
you.
Mhm.
And
I love that they
liked
keep
it.
the
I thought it was
devil and
good.
the wandering Jew line too. Like that is one of my favorite lines, just because it's the react is I am not the devil. And I'm not Jewish.
It's great.
Yeah.
I love it. But yeah, I mean, just yeah, so great. Sound of Her Wings. I think. Wait, who was the one that said that it wasn't their favorite?
Mason.
Mason.
It was me because
That's
I was
right.
very much affected by 24/7.
That's right. Okay.
But
But
episode 6 is a close second.
fair enough. Fair enough. So yeah, so obviously we all love this episode. It's most of our favorites of the season. And,
One final bravo to Jamie Childs. This was the last
Yes.
episode he did.
Yeah, Jamie Childs, a bravo also to, of course, to Kirby Hell Baptiste.
Beast.
Fucking death in every respect.
If-
I could
if
hardly, I could scarcely imagine a better live action death. Yeah.
If I will say it, if you have been listening to this podcast at this point and are still stuck in your let's say primitive ways of thinking that the casting is somehow wrong, listen to exactly what we're saying, because
Yeah.
every character is pitch perfect.
Yeah. But anyway, all right. I think it's kind of hard to talk about the next 4 episodes as separate entities because they're the only ones I think in the season with the way they adapted it that are kind of hard to distinguish as their own individual episodes, I think.
Oh yeah, it goes definitely into a
Yeah.
more typical here's a storyline way.
Mhm.
And it's kind of like that in the comic, except, Men of Good Fortune is just
Yeah, Men of Good Fortune just isn't slapped in the middle at this time.
yeah.
So in a
Yeah.
way, I guess that's what it has working in its favor. But I guess let's sort of talk about the next 4 as a block. I would say, Doll's House, Playing House, Collectors, and Lost Hearts. Who would like to begin?
I'm going to take this one. Okay. First off, they didn't cut Hal Sondheim tribute act. In the comic, they didn't make mention of it because John Cameron Mitchell, who's playing Hal, is great. this is also the arc that I think they actually changed the most from the comic. Like in the comic, Rose's mother is alive, and is a character who's with her.
Yeah,
Um,
and she hasn't been separated from her brother, which is an interesting decision.
well, she has been separated. Her brother's been kidnapped by these two characters, Barnaby and Clarice, who are in the comic. Um, but what's basically this is probably the big DC universe had to be extracted from because Jed is basically escaping into dreams and the dreaming like he is in the show.
Hmm.
But there he's meeting Hector Hall and Lyta Hall. Now, Lyta Hall is a character in the show, but is very different, and Hector is her dead husband, and they are a married couple in both. But Hector Hall is a version of the DC hero, the Sandman, who is also related to, I think, Hawkman somehow,
I believe
because
so. Yes.
Wow.
because this is post Crisis on Infinite Earths. So we're dealing with a bunch of DC continuity that the general audience isn't aware of. Um, so a lot of that is just pulled out, and I think for good reason. Same with the two nightmares who are basically the tempters of Jed in the dreams, making his fantasy come true, called Brute and Glob. They are excised completely and changed with the show original, which I think is actually a really good choice because it helps make the themes of the season come out. I'm sorry, I'm rambling. Better, and it's such a good performance, and killing off the Walker's mother also just helps with that emotional arc. It makes it work just a lot better than trying to have to adapt all this DC continuity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
like,
so
oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead first because this is going to be kind of a big thing. So go ahead.
That's fair. I'll just say real quick. At this point, like, I'll say this as someone who had never read the comics or like knew nothing about the story. Nothing in the show to me felt like, oh, they had to adapt a DC character out of it. Like everything was very consistent to me, and it felt like, okay, this is all, yeah. Like if the comic was just the show, it would make sense to me. So yeah, that's it. I just wanted to say
Yeah.
they adapted out of DC pretty well.
It helps that the character of Lyta in the show is given the same role in a lot of the show as Rose's mother. Um, uh,
But I do want to give it a shout out to just the casting of the entire house, the
but
doll's
first, I
house.
think Marcus had a thing he wanted
Oh yeah,
to.
sorry. I go ahead.
No, yeah,
Marcus.
it's like so. Like this is the big thing because one of the plot lines of the Doll's House is that in Dream's absence, several dreams and nightmares have escaped the dreaming, and now he's trying to put them back. The Corinthian, Fiddler's Green, and two other nightmares in the comic named Brute and Glob that in the series was changed to a new nightmare named Galt. Now, one thing I really like about this is that once she comes back to the dreaming, she gives Dream this whole spiel about how she doesn't want to be a nightmare anymore. She wants to be a dream. And Dream rebuffs her, saying, "We don't ever change." And that is the big change I was talking about that I really like that the series did because in his imprisonment, the world changed while Dream remained static. And so he believes he's never changed. Whereas everything else up to this point, including Men of Good Fortune, shows that he has changed. And that's the big issue. The world changed without Dream there to change with him. So that's part of what the Doll's House arc in the series is doing. Dream has to learn to change. It just gives him a character arc that wasn't there in the comics because his character was kind of stagnant at that point that I just really liked.
Nice. Yeah. Oh no, definitely. Yeah. I really enjoyed that. Definitely. Um, but what I was about to say was I wanted to give a shout out to the casting of the actual like house that Rose Walker is living in at the time. We already called out the casting of Hal, John Cameron Mitchell, but I also want to call out Ken and Barbie here, specifically for Lily Travers as Barbie, for a couple of reasons. First off, she made an appearance in Doctor Who as Barbie, or not Barbie, as Polly in Twice Upon a Time, the first
Oh,
Doctor
really?
companion. Yeah. That
Oh,
was
yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
But
that makes it
also,
even funnier because her dream companion Martin Tembones is voiced by Lenny Henry.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But also I'm just really excited because I really liked how she played the role. So I'm very excited for her to eventually do Game of You as Barbie.
Yeah.
Like,
I find it so interesting that in like they didn't change much about any of like the characters in the doll's house like themselves in the actual
Mhm.
house. Like all their insecurities are still there. Um, but like the Audible leans way into the sort of almost creepy, off-putting nature. Like Chantel is played by BB North in the Audible version, and she's playing up the eccentric old lady act. Um, Whereas in the actual show, they're Chantel and Zelda are both a bit younger and just a bit more like peppy almost. Like
Mm.
there's still the goth spider lesbians, um, but like it's almost like, oh, look at how like these quirky people are kind of just all a found family. Also, they kept all of the dreams that Rose invades, including the fact that Chantel wants to marry a sentence, which is
So good.
such a
I
weird thing from the
love the way they
comic that I
did that.
love.
speaking
Yeah.
of like changing the characters or playing into them differently, I remember when I first got to these episodes, I said in our group chats, like, "Oh, he has a man bun. Oh God, Ken's an even bigger douche."
Oh yes.
Yep.
Uh,
Um, Also in the Doll's House here, we get our first look at Mer Pumpkinhead as played by Mark Hamill. Um, it's just great. It's great fucking casting. He does a
Yeah,
great job with it.
that
I
came
do
out
like
of nowhere.
right? I do like that they moved up Mer Pumpkinhead's like inclusion in the show. I think we already mentioned that before.
I'm glad that it's one of the characters they didn't try to also give an explanation for. Merv just exists.
Yeah, as he should, and so does Mark Hamill.
And
Um,
it's kind of perfect for the dream logic of the Sandman.
oh
So
yeah, yeah.
it's like
Um,
it's a dream. There you go. There's your explanation.
but I know Mason gave a great call out to another character we meet here, Gilbert, as played by Stephen Fry,
Yes.
who is just fucking brilliant. Like it is just one of the best castings in the show. I fucking
I
love
love
it.
how one we get in episode 7 we get a musical number, like
Oh yeah, it was
which
so
is
good.
just a delight already. And it really feels very close knit, like sort of like the comic did. But like Rose goes to a back alley to take a phone call when she's attacked by just some people, and you have Gilbert coming in, and Stephen Fry is just so affable. He's like, "Oh, I see. I was coming to assist you, but I see you are quite capable on your own."
Hmm. Oh, he's so good. He's
I love
so
Stephen
good.
Fry so much.
Yeah, and the way he plays collectors, like when he's there with Rose the whole time, he's fucking
Yes.
amazing. The way he does his goodbye scene, like I like that is the closest I came in this TV series. I thought there were gonna be a fuck ton of other scenes that I was gonna be like, oh, that's really sad, whatever. But that his goodbye scene was the one I fucking teared up at. I don't know
Yeah.
what it was, but just the way Stephen Fry delivered that scene, I fucking
I
loved
really
it.
hope they bring him back for Gilbert's other small appearances later on.
Yeah.
Just 'cause it is too good of a casting uh, to mix up. Also, like he was also just my fan cast as Gilbert when I heard they were like when I heard the show was happening, and I'm
Oh,
so
really?
glad. Yeah,
That's
like
great.
That's awesome.
if you get anyone for this role, it's Stephen Fry.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Also,
Um,
the we haven't mentioned. Have we mentioned the actress playing Rose herself? Really?
Not really. I don't think so.
Yeah. So it's I'm trying to find the name here. But
She's
it's yeah,
fantastic.
she's fantastic. This is her first role in anything. So
Why can I
like
not? Why can I
Really?
not find the
it's
actress? Oh, there we go.
Kai, yeah, Kaio Ra, or I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce that, but
Mhm.
breakout star.
Yeah.
Like
Oh yeah. She's amazing.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
really hope this like helps catapult her career as an actress, just because Rose Walker is hard character to play, and they didn't like they aged her up a little bit, but they still kept just how much like just the youthful nature of the character. Like in the comics, she's a teenager. Here, she's 21, which is I think part of that's also just the shifting time scales a little bit,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
of the added time.
Um,
But
But
she just hits.
so I do want to specifically call out. I know we're like covering this as a block, but I do want to specifically call out the episode "Collectors," which is one of my favorite issues of the comic, and I fucking love like everything they did with it. It really is one of the best adaptations in the show, I think. Um,
So
First off,
the one disappointment is that they didn't keep the twist about the serial convention a secret for long.
well, I would say that's because they pretty much adapted Collectors across all four episodes.
Yeah.
Like they had it there throughout all four, like to the point where like the finale of Collectors was like the first 20 minutes of Lost Hearts.
Yes.
So
Uh,
there's that. But no, so yeah, so like I think like for the sake of like making like the serial convention, like oh, it's about serial killers, whatever. There's that included early on. I don't really have an issue with that. That's fine. That's also the scene where we get the great callback to they think that the Corinthian is the one that killed the lady with the eyes out in 24/7. I love that.
yeah.
That's a great little connection. But just on that whole episode, there there's some really fucked up scenes in the original comic. Because first off, I think Collectors is the second ever double length issue in the Sandman, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know
It's
I don't know
fairly
what it is
long.
about that issue that made it double length, but they chose to make it double length, and there's a lot of material to work with there. Um, but the character that they changed the one scene from for the better, most definitely. Um,
Oh wait,
the
can I guess?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I guess which was Jed originally supposed to go into the hotel room?
You see in the comic, Jed isn't there, if I remember correctly, right?
Jed is
Oh.
locked in the
No.
Corinthian's trunk.
Yeah. So
Oh, I
Jed's
see.
not there. Instead, Rose is
Oh,
the one
And
that goes
remember,
with
Rose
him.
is 16 in the comic.
Yeah. And so
see.
so the scene
It's
Which
not the
happens-
Corinthian that stops Funland.
it's Dream.
It's Dream.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens is in the comic is and the Audible is Gilbert sees the Corinthian. He flips. He's like, right, Rose. I must leave you. But if you're ever in danger, read this name. And to this point, Rose hasn't heard Dream's name as Morpheus or Dream. And on this paper, it's Morpheus. She screams Morpheus, and Dream just sweeps in, and has basically his first real heroic moment.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, just wanted to mention that because
But also,
Wow.
also, they don't back away from the fact that Funland is.
oh yeah, that he is a pedophile and that he wants to do things to that child. So that's all there.
I was worried. I'm like, oh. Well, first off, Boyd Holbrook as the Corinthian in these episodes just gets so charismatic. Like, I'm like,
Oh my god, yeah. I fucking love the ice cream scene with Jed in like
Oh,
episode
yeah.
in episode 8, I think it is.
I'm like,
Like,
yeah, they're
oh,
not,
yeah.
he's not gonna kill Jed. They're not gonna kill Jed. They wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
do that. That would be such a weird change. And it's like, but there's just so much tension. He's like, oh, he's actually being nice, and like they made the Corinthian just a bit more complex, I think, and genuinely enjoying life while also enjoying killing people and eating.
well, because they made it so that the Corinthian was around for the entire time that Dream was locked away. So he has been enjoying life for that long on the mortal plane.
Yeah.
It's been great. I you really do get the sense that like he's just having a good time. He doesn't actually think that his lord is strong enough to come back and stop him.
Yes.
It's great. Yeah.
I do have a small question about like the idea of the Corinthian being there for the entire time.
Okay.
Do they imply that the Corinthian is the reason that like murders exist in the 20th century?
No.
Because it
No.
sounds like everyone was like pretty inspired by him.
No, I don't think so. No, just that
Okay,
he's a famous murderer. That's about it.
Yeah.
I didn't think so, but I just wanted to double check
Yeah.
Yeah.
because I didn't know if that was a comic thing or something.
I also
No, yeah, because the Corinthian only breaks out like it's implied not long before Dream comes back in the
Yeah.
comic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which is interesting because there's the whole overture, which it was published like for like the 25th or like it was for like an anniversary for the Sandman. I think it was the 25th, and that very much goes into why Dream was able to be captured in the first place. And it plays with some interesting ideas. If anyone hasn't read it, I think they should read it. But I think more interestingly is with just the whole serial convention. I think Collectors was a double length issue because I think because the artist changes for Men of Good Fortune and then changes back. I think the artist might have just needed more time. So Neil then wrote Men of Good Fortune.
Okay.
So that could have been how it is. I think it's also really interesting to see, and I mentioned this kind of in non-spoilers, where one of the serial killers was gender bent. And
the Good Doctor.
The Good Doctor.
Okay.
And Jill Winternitz, who plays her, has this. I don't want to call it stilted because it's not stilted, but it's this very almost clinical performance that I love what they did. I also love that they added this whole plot of we need to get the Corinthians' attention, because like they lose, like it's a very quick thing in the comic that they lose their guest of honor and the Corinthian just happens to be by, and becomes the guest of honor, as well as just a lot of the narration around why these people kill the way they do as well as including some of the political messaging that is in Collectors in in that montage sequence when Gilbert and Rose are searching the hotel, including those who kill because they think God calls them to kill, and like just a lot of it's word for word from comic, but it is still very relevant today. But yeah, the sequence is perfect.
And I will say, like, slightly jumping back, I love the scene when we're introduced to these like these few people in the diner. And as someone who doesn't know the story, I'm like, oh, why are these people friends with each other? Oh, wait, are they? Oh, I see. Got it. Okay, they're serial killers. Okay,
Yep.
cool.
Yeah, makes sense.
Also, Nimrod is played by Carrie Shale, who was Abel in the Audible adaptation.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I did not put that together.
Yes.
Oh, nice.
Also, the young Ethel Cripps is in this Niam Walsh, who is I can't remember. She's Cluracan's brother in the Audible, Cluracan's sister in the Audible adaptation.
Okay.
Yeah, so they have some crossover there, just in different roles, which I think is really really fun, and really interesting.
So I would like to start wrapping up this conversation now, but I do
Yeah,
want to
I was about to get there because then in episode 10 we get probably two of my favorite scenes in the entire series.
go ahead.
The first one is the big twist that the Corinthian was not the main antagonist in the doll's house. It was Desire.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so good.
So much.
And then and then like the way Sturridge and Park play that scene together, like, oh, it's fucking amazing.
And then because I knew the story, even with the changes, I kind of had an idea where they were going to go. The one scene I did not expect that I really loved was how the final episode teased Season of Mists.
Yeah. So actually, I want to turn that to Mason for a second. With that final scene, what do you think is going to happen? Because I think the rest of us obviously know what's going to happen with Lucifer there, what her final decision is. But what do you think, Mason?
So this is interesting. So she talks about how she wants to get some sort of revenge on Dream. I assume because there's a line about how she wants to like expand Hell's borders until that's all there is, right?
Mm-hmm.
I honestly don't even know where to start because like the big thing with this show is I have not expected a single thing that happened. But if I were to imagine I would have. Oh yeah, because there's also a line where it's like, or I might be mixing it up, but like I would imagine there's going to be like some battle or something, or I don't know. It feels like something that's either going to be like a game of like another game of wits, or it's something that's going to be like a big event between like heaven and hell that like Earth gets caught in the crossfire or something. But like that feels a bit out of place in its story about Dream. So I honestly don't know. I
Okay.
legitimately have no idea.
So
I was just
I'm
curious
not
to
gonna,
know what
I'm
you
not going to
think.
spoil anything.
Yeah, don't say anything because
same
I
here.
definitely want to leave that a surprise for him.
But he
I
was-
will say one thing though, just another shout out to the show's absolutely perfect casting. Roger Allam is the voice of Azazel.
Oh, that's
Ooh.
brilliant.
No, but what I was going to say on Mason's point is Mason isn't nearly as far off as he might think.
He
But
caught on to the right
Okay.
lines.
he caught on to the right lines, and you caught on to the ideas, but they aren't going to play out the way that you might think.
Yeah,
Like
Good.
it's you're so close yet so far.
yeah.
Fair enough. And
Which is super interesting because what Lucifer does end up doing is probably the most famous thing about Lucifer Morningstar as a
Yes.
character, which I love. Like, oh my god, I love that. But I love that there's someone here that doesn't know what that is.
Ooh, wait, hold on. Does it have something to do with the fact that there's a Lucifer TV show?
I'm not going to say.
In a loosely connected way, yeah.
Got it. Okay.
You know what we forgot?
All right.
I don't think any of us mentioned Mazikeen.
Holy shit, yeah, that's right.
We
Yeah, fucking Mazikeen is here. I mean, I love Leslie Ann Brandt from the Lucifer TV show. But I did love the actress they got here. She's great. Yeah, I mean,
yeah, but
not that she does much, but it's
yeah.
great that she's there.
She's there, and they keep the whole the whole burnt design on the surface, whereas with Leslie and Brandt, you kind of can't do that with a full 25 episode season.
In the first three seasons.
Yeah.
So, Mason. So I'd like to wrap this conversation with one final thing. You mentioned something because we had to cut recordings because of an interruption. But you mentioned something between those recordings, Mason, that I'd like you to bring up that question. If you remember what that
Okay.
is.
Yes. Now this is a question. By the way, I will say, Jacob, because I kept this from you, you could probably tell I really loved the show.
Yes.
I made it a point not to tell anybody my opinions because I wanted this talk to be so fresh.
That's awesome.
But the question I had, and it's a bit more personal that I'm asking fans of the Sandman. Where do I go from here? Like, because I own the Audibles, like, because I own both of the Audible releases. Actually, before the show came out, I was going to listen to those, but Jacob told me not to because I should come at it from a fresh eye in case I was ever on a podcast.
Just in case.
Just in case.
Just in case.
But yeah, so like, do I go there? Do I do the comics, or are you guys going to be dicks
you have options.
and make me wait for season
Make you
2?
wait. Well, let's be real. There are two options from this point with the Sandman Netflix series. Either it's going to get canceled because Netflix, or you're going to have to wait a really long time for season 2. Neither of those options are obviously preferable for you because you're clearly into it and
I'm interested. Yes.
I would recommend, so I first experienced Sandman through the Audible.
Did you really?
Okay.
Yes, because
I didn't know that.
Part of it's just personal reasons. Having certain family members who happen to look down on comics as a medium, and having to convince them, no, they're actually.
I have broken through that barrier.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I would recommend the Audible.
I could recommend either, honestly.
However, I would say do it in parallel. There are so many ways to buy the Sandman in comics. Like Marcus recently just purchased the first 2 volumes of the deluxe editions. Which, Marcus, how much do those cover?
Hang on, let me look real quick. I'm gonna because I think the last volume is just 70 to 75, plus the overture and some of the other side stories. But
yeah, but how much do the first 2 of those cover? Is that just like specifically? I know the first one is like the first deluxe edition, volume 1 is like 1 through 20, which is
which is Act 1 of the Audible edition. Yeah.
Act 2 of the Audible is volumes 4, 5, and most of 6. Because 6 is one of those cases where it's a collection of stuff in between arcs 4 and 5, and then 5 and 7 put together because they're smaller arcs and they don't fill up a full volume together.
Okay.
If you're going to read the comic, I would recommend either the deluxe edition or the new 4 books 1, 2, 3, and 4 over the 10 trade paperbacks.
Yeah,
Or
the trade paperbacks are like, as much as I love them, are probably the least optimal way to read them.
Because while you can read Fables and Reflections in the order that's presented in the trades, because I read it through the Omnis, which does issues just 1 to 75 as 1 to 75,
Mhm.
you get a very different feel and a very different understanding of some of the things in Game of You a little better, I'd argue.
Now, of course, also this depends. If you're reading the comic, would you be getting them physically, or do you want to read them digitally? What would you prefer to read them on?
I would probably, because it's less expensive, I would probably go digital.
Well,
And also,
okay,
I
so
don't
so
have
then
a
you
ton of space.
then you'd probably end up doing the trades. Actually, wait, I think they do have the deluxe editions on digital.
They do. I did look it up a little while ago.
Then I would go with the
So-
deluxe. I would
Yeah,
go with the deluxe.
let me just make sure how
Okay,
those are
so-
collected. So if
So
it's-
I have it here. I have I have them all open, but so the first deluxe edition is issues 1 through 16 of the main series, and Sandman Midnight Theater 1. Volume 2, deluxe edition 2 is 17 through 31. Seeing if, volume 3. Hang on, now I'm backwards. Curse you, Barnes and Noble.
actually, Mason, you know what I just found digitally? So do you read
What?
through Comixology or?
Kindle, Comixology, like.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So they also just put out these sort of like to promote the Netflix series editions of them that are split into 4 books.
Yep.
And
These are the latest paperback editions.
and these are like the perfect ones for you, I
Yeah.
would say. Yeah. Book 1 here is 1 to 20,
So that's volumes 1 to 3 of the original trades.
and book 2 is 21 to 37 plus a special and the Winter's Edge minis. So yeah, honestly, yeah, I would recommend doing those.
If
And
you
then
could link, like, if you could link me to that would.
I could absolutely link you those. Yeah, definitely.
Sweet.
And then yeah, and those actually would lead pretty nicely into you doing the Audible ones. Yeah. So if that's where I would recommend you go next. Reading the source material is always fantastic. But yeah, I'm so glad that you're interested enough though to even want to further your interest your reading of it. So yeah,
I'm fascinated.
yeah, I love that. Well, I'm so happy that we made a Sandman fan out of you.
Yes.
That's
Yay.
great. And I think for the most part, all 4 of us enjoyed this series.
Yeah.
In case you couldn't tell. So yeah, this has been great. This has been really great. Mason, I gotta say, I'm so fucking happy that I've done another video with you. It's been so long.
It has been
Like,
way too long. I think I
so
brought this up in
fucking
the
long.
Discord before. Like, what was the last video that like I recorded with you all? Like,
I don't even fucking know.
Was he on the
Oh.
Two Doctors commentary?
I
I think
was, yeah.
I think yeah, maybe it was that. It was probably
Wait,
that.
it was either that or it was the VMA ranking video.
Oh, okay. I forget if
forget
that was
which one it
before
was.
or after. And then
Yeah, it's
Marcus
been
is
months.
probably about the same amount of time. Yeah, so it's been great to get to do something else with you two. Seriously, yeah, it's been fantastic. Actually, you know it would be
Absolutely.
fucking awesome
What?
if when we eventually did the Sandman fresh faced episodes, like to actually like cover the comic on the podcast, we had Mason on for that.
That
And
would be.
actually, you know, it could be the same crew, all
It
4 of
could be.
us.
I'm down for that. Just give
That'd
me
be
a
fucking
Oh,
awesome.
deadline.
absolutely.
That would be so cool. Oh, okay. We have ideas. We're gonna talk about those ideas.
We will off camera. Yeah, sorry. As you
camera,
can
talk
tell,
about those ideas.
hi, I'm Jacob. I'm the one that has to bring us in because we are going off on crazy
Jacob, fuck off.
tangents.
I'm the fucking host. Fuck you. So we're gonna start wrapping this up. This has
Am
been
I
fantastic.
the able to your cane?
You are. I'm gonna fucking murder you, and that's just the way it is. So anyway, thank you all so much for listening. It really does mean a lot. Once again, follow us all on Twitter. Mason is at the GD256. Marcus is at Surge Jedi Sentinel. I am at Jomo with 3 underscores, and Jacob is at Nude5996. All of those we linked down in the description. You can go check us out. Follow us all there. It's always fun. I'm sure we're always up to something. And hey, if we're all going to be reading, if you both are going to be reading the Sandman, you can keep Twitter updated with that. If people go follow you there for that stuff, that's great.
Yeah.
So yeah, be on the lookout.
If you're on YouTube, subscribe to both Marcus and Mason's channels. They both do wonderful content. Mason perhaps more sporadically. Marcus has a bunch of media reviews, mainly Doctor Who, but he's branched out, especially recently with other stuff that are all wonderful.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been great. It really has been great, and I'm so happy to be doing videos with you guys again. It really does mean a lot.
Likewise.
So yeah, so for those listening, next up on Fresh Face Comics, we have episode 23 coming out covering Batman Zero Year. If you're looking forward to the next episode, go check it out.
That should be out next Monday from the time I think you're listening to this.
Also, make sure to subscribe to Blood Donut Studios on YouTube. Also, subscribe and rate the podcast wherever you're listening to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor, whatever. Go check us out there. Also, we have another bonus episode coming up soon. We're covering our first Marvel content on a bonus episode.
Yes.
Yay!
We could start teasing that, I guess, because that should be pretty soon.
That should be fairly soon. Yes.
It's a TV series. We can do that. We could say that. So be on the lookout for that. That'll be super fun. And I guess that about does it. Any closing thoughts? Anything to plug from any of you? Or are we good?
No idea. I'll just say it was really funny as someone who's never read the comics to hear you all say random names that I've never heard of, and then everyone goes, "Oh yes!" Like yes. 3 Octobers in January. What does that mean? I have no idea.
Oh my god, that's fucking great. All right. Guess that does it. Thank you all so much for listening. Until next time, this has been Joey Morgan,
Jacob Licklider,
Mason,
Marcus Cotton.
Goodbye.
Bye.